The mechanical pencil in Karen Westfield's hand snapped in two as she glared out her bay window. The Peterson children were squealing again, their high-pitched voices piercing through her closed windows like nails on a chalkboard. It was the third time this week, and it wasn't even Wednesday. Absolutely unacceptable, she muttered, reaching for her phone to document the infraction. Karen, treasurer of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association for 4 consecutive years, prided herself on maintaining order in their pristine suburban community. At 52, with her immaculately highlighted blonde bob and collection of tailored blazers, she considered herself the neighborhood's unofficial guardian. Some neighbors called her dedicated. Others used less flattering terms behind her back. She snapped several photos of the Peterson children playing basketball in their driveway, making sure to capture the timestamp 5:47 p.m. Well within quiet hours, according to the HOA bylaws she had personally revised last spring. The vibration of her phone interrupted her documentation. It was a text from Martin Fletcher, the HOA president, and her most reliable ally. Asterisk agenda for tomorrow's meeting asterisk. Karen smiled thinly. Perfect timing. "I got a new item for the top of the list," she said aloud to her empty living room, already composing her response. Across the street, Michael Rodriguez watched the all-too-familiar scene unfold through his own window. He moved to Sunnyside Estates with his husband Diego just 6 months ago, attracted by the well-maintained properties and family-friendly atmosphere. What the realtor hadn't mentioned was Karen Westfield, the neighborhood's self-appointed enforcer. Michael's phone buzzed with a neighborhood app notification. Reminder. Children's recreational activities restricted to community playground during weekday evenings per bylaw 7.32. He sighed, knowing exactly who had posted it. This wasn't Karen's first campaign against the Petersons, a young family with 3 energetic kids under 10. Last month, it had been about their garbage cans being visible from the street for an extra hour. Before that, their mailbox paint being sunset red instead of the approved crimson cardinal. "She's at it again," Michael called to Diego, who was preparing dinner in their kitchen. "What now?" Diego asked, not looking up from the vegetables he was chopping. "The Peterson kids, playing basketball. During the sacred quiet hours," Michael replied, rolling his eyes. "I swear she times her complaints for right before HOA meetings to maximize impact." Diego set down his knife. "You know, I've been thinking about that empty patch of yard on our side lawn." Michael raised an eyebrow. "The one you've been wanting to landscape." "What if," Diego said, a mischievous smile forming, "we did something a little more recreational with it instead?" "Like what?" Diego leaned against the counter. "Remember those pop-up splash pads we saw at the Johnson's barbecue? The ones all the neighborhood kids loved." Michael's eyes widened as he caught his husband's meaning. "The ones that are technically temporary structures, not permanent installations that would require HOA approval." "Exactly," Diego nodded. "And coincidentally, they would be positioned right in view of Karen's precious bay window." Michael glanced back out the window, where Karen was now taking measurement photos of the basketball hoop's height. A slow smile spread across his face. "That," he said, "is absolutely brilliant." The monthly HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a beige building as bland as the cookies Karen always brought. Tonight, she'd arrived 20 minutes early to arrange the chairs in perfect rows and place her presentation materials at the front table. "Point number 4, Karen announced, her voice carrying through the half-filled room. "Noise violations have increased 32% this quarter." She clicked to the next slide, revealing a bar graph with dramatic red columns. "I documented 17 instances in the past month alone, primarily from the Peterson residents." Sarah Peterson shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The young mother looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes as she bounced her youngest on her knee. "My kids are just playing basketball," Sarah said quietly. "They're in bed by 8. Karen smiled and reached her eyes. "The bylaws clearly state that quiet hours begin at 5:30 p.m. on weekdays. Perhaps a more structured after-school program would help channel their energy." Michael, sitting in the back row beside Diego, raised his hand. "I've been living across from the Petersons for 6 months now, and I've never found the noise disruptive." Karen's jaw tightened. "Well, some of us work from home and require a professional environment." "So do I," Michael replied evenly. "I'm a children's book illustrator. The sound of kids playing actually inspires me." Several neighbors nodded in agreement, causing Karen to bristle visibly. Martin Fletcher, the HOA president, cleared his throat. "Let's table this discussion for now and move on to property maintenance issues." Karen reluctantly yielded the floor, but not before adding, "I'll be sending out a reminder email about noise regulations tomorrow." After the meeting, Michael approached Sarah in the parking lot. "Don't let her get to you," he said. "My husband and I love hearing your kids play." Sarah smiled tiredly. "Thanks. It's just, they need to burn off energy after school, you know." and the community playground is a 15-minute drive. Michael nodded thoughtfully. I might have a solution. Do your kids like water play? The next Saturday dawned bright and warm. Michael and Diego had spent the evening setting up their yard. 3 colorful splash pads connected by shallow water channels now covered their side lawn. A small slide emptied into a toddler pool, and sprinklers created rainbow arcs in the morning sunlight. It's perfect, Diego said, adjusting the final sprinkler head, and completely within HOA regulations. These are all temporary structures that can be deflated and stored. Michael checked his watch. The Peterson kids should be up by now. Want to invite them over. Before Diego could answer, they spotted Karen power walking down the sidewalk in her designer athleisure wear. She stopped dead in her tracks when she saw their creation, her mouth falling open in shock. What is that? She demanded, pointing an accusatory finger at the water play area. Good morning, Karen, Michael replied cheerfully. Just setting up some summer fun. Would you like to see how it works? As if on cue, Diego turned on the garden hose, sending water bursting through the sprinklers. A fine mist drifted across the lawn and directly toward Karen. She jumped back with a shriek, her white tennis shoes now speckled with water droplets. This is completely inappropriate for a front yard. What about the water conservation guidelines? Actually, Diego interjected, holding up his phone. I checked the bylaws. Temporary recreational equipment is permitted between the hours of 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. on weekends, and we're using a timer to ensure we stay within water usage recommendations. Karen's face flushed red as she scrambled for a rebuttal. Before she could speak, excited shouts echoed down the street. The Peterson children were racing toward the impromptu water park, their parents following with amused smiles. Is this really for us to play with? The oldest Peterson boy asked, eyes wide with wonder. Absolutely, Michael answered. We thought the neighborhood could use a little more fun. Karen watched in horror as more families emerged from nearby houses, drawn by the children's laughter and the colorful setup. Her impeccably planned quiet Saturday morning was unraveling before her eyes. This isn't over, she hissed, retreating toward her house. Not by a long shot. Karen paced her immaculate living room, phone pressed to her ear. The sounds of splashing and laughter from across the street had been going on for 3 hours now, and her blood pressure was rising with each gleeful shriek. Martin, this is completely unacceptable, she said to the HOA president. They've turned our respectable neighborhood into a public pool. There must be 15 children over there. On the other end of the line, Martin sighed audibly. I drove by earlier, Karen. Everything they set up is technically within guidelines. The water equipment is temporary, they're within noise ordinance hours for a weekend, and they're not charging admission. So we just let them create a water park eyesore? What about property values? What about my peace and quiet? Karen's voice climbed several octaves. Unless you can find a specific bylaw violation, my hands are tied, Martin replied. Maybe try talking to them reasonably. Karen hung up without saying goodbye, seething at the betrayal. If Martin wouldn't help, she'd handle this herself. She marched to her home office and pulled out the 3-inch binder labeled HOA Bylaws and Regulations, complete edition with amendments. Across the street, the impromptu neighborhood gathering was in full swing. Diego had fired up a grill, and parents chatted while supervising the rotating groups of children taking turns on the water equipment. Sarah Peterson approached Michael with a glass of lemonade. I can't thank you enough for this. The kids are having the time of their lives. Michael smiled, watching her 3 children splash through the sprinklers. That's what neighbors are for. Besides, it's nice to finally meet everyone properly. We've lived here 2 years, and this is the first time most of us have actually hung out together, Sarah admitted. Karen's complaints have everyone walking on eggshells. Diego joined them, flipping his chef's spatula. Speaking of Karen, she's been watching us from behind her curtains all morning. Think she'll call the police? Michael laughed. For what? Excessive fun in a residential area? As if summoned by her name, Karen emerged from her house clutching a thick binder and a camera. She marched across the street, her designer sandals slapping against the pavement with military precision. Excuse me, she announced loudly, causing several conversations to halt. I need to inform you that this gathering is in violation of HOA Regulation 12.43. Michael raised an eyebrow. And what regulation would that be, Karen? She flipped open her binder with a triumphant flourish. Section 12.43. Any gathering exceeding 12 persons must be registered with the HOA board at least 48 hours in advance. The parents exchanged glances, some starting to gather their children. Karen smiled thinly, sensing victory. Diego stepped forward, wiping his hands on his apron. Actually, Karen, if you check the meeting minutes from March, you'll see that regulation was amended. The current limit is 25 people before registration is required, and we're well under that. Karen blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. While there's also the matter of, she flipped frantically through her binder. Section 8.21 regarding lawn maintenance standards. Our grass is cut to exactly 3.5 inches within regulation, Michael countered. We measured this morning. Karen's face flushed deeper. The water runoff is creating a hazard on the sidewalk. We've installed temporary drainage channels. Diego pointed to the barely visible plastic gutters. No standing water anywhere. For each regulation Karen cited, Michael and Diego had a ready answer. They had done their homework meticulously. The other neighbors watched the exchange with growing amusement, some openly smirking as Karen became increasingly flustered. Finally, she snapped her binder shut. Fine, but be warned, I'll be documenting everything. She held up her camera and reviewing every applicable regulation. As Karen stormed back to her house, one of the fathers called out, Hey Karen, we saved you a burger if you want to join us. The group burst into laughter as Karen's rigid posture somehow stiffened even further. She didn't look back. Inside her house, Karen downloaded the photos she'd taken and began composing an email to the entire HOA board. If Martin wouldn't act on his own, she forced a special session. She titled the email over GNT, Neighborhood Decorum Crisis, and began typing furiously. Outside, the party continued, with more neighbors arriving by the minute. Someone had brought a portable speaker, and now music filled the air alongside the children's laughter. The Rodriguez-Pearson Water Park Day was becoming the social event of the season, and it was only just beginning. By Thursday, Karen's emergency HOA meeting request had been granted. The email she'd sent contained 37 photographs of the Rodriguez Water Park, each annotated with potential violations. Martin had finally relented, if only to stop the barrage of messages Karen had been sending hourly. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the clubhouse. Karen arrived at 6:15, armed with a PowerPoint presentation and printed handouts. Her hair was freshly styled, and she wore her most authoritative blazer, navy blue with gold buttons. This is a matter of precedent, she rehearsed under her breath, arranging her materials with precision. If we allow this flagrant disregard for neighborhood standards, what's next? Bounce houses? Food trucks? Petting zoos? As board members and neighbors began to file in, Karen was dismayed to see nearly triple the usual attendance. Word had spread about the agenda, and curious residents wanted to witness the showdown. Let's call this special session to order, Martin announced at 7:05, tapping his gavel. We have one item on the agenda tonight, the recreational equipment at the Rodriguez residence. Karen straightened in her chair. I prepared a presentation. Before we begin, Martin interrupted, I should note that we've received some correspondence on this matter. He gestured to Diane, the board secretary, who stood with a thick stack of papers. We've received 28 emails from residents about the water park. Karen smiled smugly. Clearly, others were as outraged as she was. 26 of those emails were in support of the Rodriguez family's activities, Diane continued. Many mentioned how the weekend gathering fostered a sense of community and allowed neighbors to finally meet one another. Karen's smile froze. And the other two? Both from you, Diane replied, avoiding eye contact. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. Karen felt heat rising in her cheeks but maintained her composure. If I may proceed with my presentation, she said firmly, standing to connect her laptop to the projector. For the next 15 minutes, Karen methodically outlined her case against the water park. She cited property values, water usage concerns, noise pollution, and the dangerous precedent of allowing carnival attractions in their dignified community. When she finished, Martin thanked her and opened the floor for discussion. Michael raised his hand first. May I respond? Martin nodded, and Michael walked to the front of the room carrying a single sheet of paper. First, I want to thank Karen for her concern about our neighborhood, he began, earning surprised glances from many. It's clear she cares deeply about Sunnyside Estates, as do we all. Karen blinked, wrong-footed by the unexpected civility. What Diego and I created wasn't meant to cause problems. It was meant to solve one, Michael continued. Our neighborhood has amazing families, but many of us barely knew each other before last weekend. The water park brought people together. He held up his paper. I compiled some numbers of my own. Last weekend, 37 children from 18 families spent time at our water park. Parents exchanged phone numbers, playdates were arranged, and 3 different neighborhood initiatives were organized, including a fundraiser for the community garden Karen proposed last year. Several heads turned toward Karen, who shifted uncomfortably. As for property values, Michael added, I spoke with 2 realtors this week. Both confirmed that active, friendly neighborhoods with community engagement typically command higher property values than those without. One even suggested our weekend gatherings could be a selling point. Karen opened her mouth to object, but Michael wasn't finished. That said, we understand concerns about noise and appearance, so we made some adjustments. He clicked to a new slide showing the modified layout. We've reoriented the splash pads to direct sound away from neighboring houses, installed more efficient drainage, and added decorative planters to enhance the aesthetic appeal. The images showed the water equipment now partially screened by attractive flowering shrubs and movable containers, creating a garden-like atmosphere. Additionally, we've created a schedule limiting water play to weekends and Wednesday afternoons with clear start and times posted on the neighborhood app. The following Saturday dawned bright and clear, perfect water park weather. Karen stood at her bay window, coffee mug in hand, watching the Rodriguez household with hawkish intensity. As the newly appointed chair of the Neighborhood Recreation Committee, she had drafted a 3-page document of suggested guidelines that had been distributed to all residents the previous evening. Across the street, Michael and Diego were setting up their water equipment according to the new layout they presented at the meeting. True to their word, they had added decorative planters around the perimeter and repositioned the noisier elements away from neighboring houses. Karen checked her watch, 9:58 a.m. The guidelines clearly stated recreational activities should begin no earlier than 10 o'clock a.m. She set down her coffee and picked up her phone, camera ready. At precisely 10 o'clock a.m., Diego turned on the water system. Karen deflated slightly, denied even this minor violation to document. The Peterson children arrived first as usual, followed by a steady stream of families. Karen noted with surprise that several neighbors nodded or waved in her direction as they passed, something that rarely happened before. She gave a tight smile and small wave in return, unsure how to interpret this new development. By noon, Karen had identified 3 potential violations: a sprinkler that appeared to be spraying slightly beyond the property line, music that might exceed the 65 decibel limit she'd specified, and possible overcrowding based on her calculation of 4 square feet per person. She documented each meticulously. Her concentration was broken by a knock at her door. Frowning, she set down her notepad and went to answer it. Michael stood on her porch, holding a plastic-wrapped plate. "Good afternoon, Karen," he said cheerfully. "We're grilling again today and thought you might like some lunch." Karen stared at the plate, momentarily speechless. The burger looked perfectly cooked, accompanied by a colorful side salad. "I'd thank you," she managed, accepting the plate awkwardly. Also, Michael continued, "The Recreation Committee members are having an informal meeting at the water park around 2 o'clock. Since you're the chair, we thought you should be there." The meeting wasn't on the schedule, Karen said automatically. Michael smiled. "Just an impromptu discussion about next weekend's activities. No official decisions, I promise. But your input would be valuable." After he left, Karen stood in her foyer, plate in hand, feeling oddly wrong-footed. Was this a genuine olive branch or some kind of strategy? She'd been prepared for resistance, even hostility, not lunch invitations and requests for her input. She ate the burger at her kitchen table, reluctantly acknowledging it was delicious. Through her window, she could see the water park in full swing, the new layout indeed looking more organized and aesthetically pleasing than before. At 1:55 p.m., after changing her outfit 3 times, Karen crossed the street. She decided on casual but professional attire, khaki capras, and a light blue blouse that said, "I'm approachable, but still in charge." "Karen, you made it," Diego called, waving her over to a shaded seating area where several committee members were gathered. Someone offered her lemonade, which she accepted after confirming it wasn't spiked with alcohol. "We were just discussing a rotating schedule for weekend themes," explained Priya Sharma, another committee member. Michael suggested a science splash with educational water experiments for the kids, and we'd rotate responsibility among interested families, added Tom Jefferson, whose twins were currently racing through the sprinklers. "Share the setup and cleanup duties." Karen nodded cautiously. "That sounds organized. I've actually drafted some additional guidelines about equipment safety checks and proper adult supervision ratios." To her surprise, the committee seemed genuinely interested in her input. They asked questions, took notes, and incorporated many of her suggestions into their plans. "You know," Michael said during a lull in the conversation, "we should have you oversee the safety protocols. No one knows the regulations better than you do, Karen." Was that a compliment or a subtle dig? Karen couldn't decide, but she found herself agreeing anyway. As the afternoon progressed, Karen remained vigilant for rule violations, but found herself increasingly distracted by the actual discussions. When Priya suggested a neighborhood talent show to coincide with the water park's 1-month anniversary, Karen found herself offering her organizational skills to create a registration system. "This is actually going better than I expected," Karen admitted to Martin, who had arrived late to the impromptu meeting. 3 weeks into the Sunnyside Estates water park experiment, Karen found herself in a position she never expected, sitting under a canopy tent with a clipboard, checking families in for Hawaiian Splash Saturday. She wore a plastic lei around her neck and had reluctantly allowed Priya's teenage daughter to place a small flower behind her ear. Remember, no running on the wet concrete pathways, she instructed the Miller twins as she handed them their participant wristbands, her idea of a proper head count and safety tracking. Yes, Ms. Westfield, they chores before darting off toward the expanded water play area, which now featured 3 distinct zones based on age appropriateness. Another of Karen's suggestions that had been enthusiastically implemented. Michael approached, carrying a tray of fresh fruit skewers. The safety inspection checklist is complete, he reported, handing her a laminated form with all boxes checked. Diego tested the water pressure and chlorine levels, and all the drainage channels are clear. Karen nodded approvingly and filed the form in her binder. Excellent. And the noise monitoring? Tom set up the decibel meter by the property line. We haven't exceeded 63 decibels all morning. This information pleased Karen more than she cared to admit. The collaborative approach was working remarkably well. Her organizational skills complemented the creative energy of the other committee members, resulting in a recreational program that was both fun and orderly. Oh, and this came for you, Michael added, handing her an envelope. Inside was a thank you card signed by all the Peterson children with a hand-drawn picture of what appeared to be Karen supervising a water slide. The inscription read, "To Ms. Westfield, the best safety person ever." A strange warmth spread through Karen's chest. She tucked the card carefully into her binder and cleared her throat. Well, children should understand the importance of proper supervision. Michael smiled knowingly but said nothing. The day progressed smoothly, with families rotating through the water park in well-organized shifts. Karen found herself actually enjoying her role as safety coordinator and registration manager. There was something satisfying about seeing her systems function efficiently while everyone had fun. During a brief lull, Martin appeared at her check-in table. Quite a transformation, he commented, glancing around at the bustling water park. Both the neighborhood and you. Karen raised an eyebrow. I'm simply ensuring things run according to guidelines. Of course, Martin nodded, failing to hide his amusement. That's why you're wearing a lei and have a hibiscus flower in your hair. Karen touched the flower self-consciously but didn't remove it. It's thematic consistency. Professional event management always incorporates cohesive visual elements. Right. And I suppose the planned water balloon toss you approved was also for professional reasons? Before Karen could formulate a suitably dignified response, commotion erupted near the center of the water park. A sleek black luxury sedan had pulled up to the curb, and a tall man in an expensive suit emerged, looking decidedly out of place among the swimsuit-clad families. Is that? Martin squinted. Gerald Harrington, Karen confirmed, recognizing the developer who had built Sunnyside Estates and still owned several vacant lots in the neighborhood. What's he doing here? They watched as Gerald surveyed the water park with an unreadable expression. Michael approached him with a friendly greeting, but the developer's response seemed curt. Karen and Martin exchanged concerned glances and moved closer to hear the conversation. This is completely unauthorized use of residential property, Gerald was saying, his voice carrying despite the background noise. This type of activity devalues the premium aesthetic of Sunnyside Estates. It's all within HOA guidelines, Michael replied calmly. We've worked with the board to ensure everything is compliant. Gerald shook his head dismissively. I retain special voting rights on covenant amendments as the developer. This was never approved by me. Other neighbors have begun to gather, the festive atmosphere dampening as they sense conflict. Furthermore, Gerald continued, pulling out his phone to take photos, I'm preparing to break ground on Phase 3 next month. Potential buyers touring the neighborhood will see this, aquatic carnival, and it's completely off-brand for the upscale community where... Mr. Harrington, Karen began, her voice calm and measured as she opened her meticulously organized binder. I understand your concerns about maintaining the premium character of Sunnyside Estates. In fact, I've spent 4 years on the HOA board defending those very standards. Gerald nodded approvingly. Then you understand why this water attraction must be shut down immediately. I understand your perspective, Karen replied, selecting a specific tabbed section of her binder. However, I should point out several relevant facts. First, according to the Master Covenant Agreement that you yourself drafted, Section 17.3 states that community-building recreational activities are encouraged provided they maintain safety and aesthetic standards. She slid a highlighted document across the table. Gerald frowned as he recognized his own legal language. Furthermore, Karen continued, turning to another section, the special voting rights you retain as developer apply only to permanent structural changes and landscaping guidelines. Temporary recreational equipment falls under HOA jurisdiction per Amendment 4, which was ratified 3 years ago. Gerald scanned the document, his frown deepening. These are temporary structures, yes, but the frequency of use essentially renders them permanent fixtures. Karen had anticipated this argument. Actually, all equipment is fully removed and stored after each scheduled event. We maintain photographic documentation of the property returned to standard residential condition between recreation days. She produced a series of dated photos showing the Rodriguez yard in its normal state. Additionally, she pressed on, not giving Gerald time to formulate a new objection. We've conducted a property value analysis. From another section of her binder, she extracted a professional-looking report. This assessment from Torres Real Estate indicates that active, family-friendly communities with structured recreational programs typically command a 4 to 8% premium over comparable neighborhoods without such amenities. Gerald skimmed the report skeptically. Lisa Torres prepared this. She's one of my preferred realtors. Yes, and she sold 6 homes in Sunnyside Estates this year alone. She believes our water park program could actually be a selling point for young families, a demographic your Phase 3 marketing materials specifically target. Karen tapped a glossy brochure featuring smiling families that Gerald's company had distributed. For the first time, Gerald looked uncertain. Even so, the noise and traffic. We maintain strict decibel monitoring, Karen interrupted, displaying a spreadsheet of hourly noise measurements. We've never exceeded the limits specified in our own noise ordinance, which is actually more restrictive than county regulations. She turned to yet another section. As for traffic, we've implemented a neighborhood walking initiative that has reduced vehicle use by 30% on water park days, and we've established a rotating parking plan to prevent street congestion. From across the water park, Michael and the other neighbors watched in amazement as Karen systematically dismantled Gerald's objections one by one. Her extensive binder, once the bane of their existence, had become their strongest defense. The fact is, Mr. Harrington, Karen concluded, this water park program is fully compliant with all applicable regulations, has been properly approved through established AHO procedures, and demonstrably enhances rather than detracts from neighborhood value. Any attempt to shut it down would likely result in protracted and unnecessary conflict. Gerald set down the documents regarding Karen with newfound respect. You've clearly done your homework, Ms. Westfield, but I still have concerns about the aesthetic presentation to potential buyers. Karen permitted herself a small smile. I anticipated that as well. She produced a final,